Welcome to the Kent Lapp podcast.
Jonathan Ulrich, welcome to the podcast.
Good to be here.
Welcome to Nashville.
Thank you. Thank you.
We were talking about flying just a little bit ago. Did you fly this weekend?
I did.
You fly here?
Yep. I went and saw some friends at a factory in Missouri and then came into Bowling Green and drove down here because the weather's sort of crappy and we're going to end up back up in Bowling Green. But
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you not staying in Nashville for the weekend?
No, I'll be,
okay.
Well, all the fun stuff is not here right now,
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's a bad time to be visiting Nashville if you want to get in on some of the fun stuff for sure. How long have you been flying and what got you into it?
I was, my youngest brother, who has NF2, got his pilot's license when he was, he didn't even have his driver's license. And I flew with him and I thought, it's a cool concept, but didn't really see it practically as something I needed. And I'm a fairly practical guy. If it's something it's going to bring value and I enjoy, I love it.
Right.
If it's something I don't enjoy and it has value, try to get someone else to do it or vice versa. Right. So, and then I started, and my youngest brother, Peter, he's critically ill, obviously with NF2, can't fly anymore. So it's sort of inspiring him a bit in the very, very first part of the journey. But I was flying small planes and chartering small planes with pilots, single pilot, right? And one day I'm sitting there thinking, boy, if this guy has a heart attack, what am I going to do, right? I'm going to watch all the way to my death. And so thought it'd be better.
You knew enough that if you're going down, you'd pull back on the steering wheel.
Yeah, but that's what kills you more than anything.
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
The pulling the yoke back and stalling. So, so I took a few lessons. I thought I'll just solo just to get the concept. I ended up falling in love with it and went all the way through, finished my license, and then ended up buying a plane and have enjoyed it. And so I sort of, I don't know where it'll end, but right now I enjoy it. I fly probably 100, 150 hours a year. So
oh wow, how many hours you got total right now?
I've just looked at my logbook yesterday. I think 350, 360.
Yeah,
so.
and obviously you have your instrument rating if you're flying.
I don't actually. No.
Really?
Nope. So I do. I take safety pilots along or instrument pilot along. I've got probably 80 hours of instrument flight.
Yeah.
But don't fly instrument without someone else because, well, it's not legal and
right.
Probably not legal for a good reason.
Sure.
So I do a lot of, like yesterday I went to Missouri and then here. So we had get up over a system, which in my Saratoga, that means it was a pretty low system,
right?
Or get underneath it or go around it.
Yeah.
So we probably added 10 minutes to our flight time in total yesterday.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
It wasn't bad.
So you flew from, and by the way, for people that don't know, you're from Dallas, Fort Worth.
Yep. So Fort Worth, Texas.
You flew from Fort Worth to, did you fly into Nashville?
So I flew from Fort Worth to Missouri. And then from Missouri, flew to Bowling Green, actually. Yep.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
Got some friends in Bowling Green we're going to spend the weekend with. So
okay, and just VFR?
Yeah.
And it's you and your wife, and you mentioned a friend.
Yep.
So you do not have, on this trip, you don't have a backup instrument.
You always weigh the pros and cons, and I can either fly a pilot into Nashville to go home with me.
Okay.
The weather's looking good, so we're going home on Monday.
Okay.
And I can always, leave tomorrow if I need to. So it's sort of a relaxed schedule on the tail end. And there's also commercial flights, and they're pretty cheap right now too.
But what would you do if you flew home commercial? What would you do with your Saratoga?
I just have to come back next week and then pick it up or something.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Or I'd, have another pilot bring it home for me.
Sure, yeah. Well, there's worse things for sure.
Yeah. It's never happened. I've always made it home. Sometimes I've had to, go an hour out of the way or something. But
I'm surprised. I thought you had I just figured you had your instrument rating for as much as you flew. Now, are you going to work on that?
Yeah.
Is that a goal
like
of
I said,
yours?
I've done all the training. I got to, sit down in front of video for about 20 hours to go take the written.
I see.
And then refresh myself to be able to, pass my check rate, obviously. So something I hope to do. I thought maybe I'd get it done during COVID, but so far we've been busier and in a good way and than ever. So I'm not taking the time for that now. So
yeah, and for those that don't know, tell us a little bit about what industry you're in, and then I am curious. I figured you would be slow during COVID.
Yeah,
Doesn't sound
so it's anyone's guess as good as another person's originally on what's going to happen, what's going to slow down, what's going to pick up. So we are in the lifestyle structures industry. So we do modular log cabins and backyard lifestyle structures. So kids' playhouses, cottage sheds, potting sheds, craft rooms. Get a lot into accessory lifestyle kind of uses. So a lot of the industry is serving sort of a storage, or it's just a shed, and we're on the other side of that spectrum a bit. And interestingly enough, for us, the last 10 years, we've really had this focus of shifting from being a commodity to more of a lifestyle structure. So it's our what we consider our core niche. It's our focus. Our mission is to help families live more memorable and organized lives. And so I feel very blessed that today, as we look at what happened during COVID, I mean, front end interest, top of funnel interest has doubled and tripled, depending which category we're talking about during COVID, because everyone's sitting at home, right? They're stuck at home. They're bored. They're cleaning out the garage. They're going, I need something for organization. Can't have a yard sale and get rid of the stuff. Yeah. Right. And also, I think during this time, people are more sentimental. They're not going to get rid of that heirloom or that whatever that item is that has meaning to them. And then the other half of it is just people. I look forward into the future, and your guess is as good as mine. But what we are looking towards, we've sort of taken a two-prong approach. We're sort of getting aggressive and bearish on the future, while at the same time really trimming back on expenditures, not headcount, not employee and team members, but rather on leaning out, right? So the last few years, the economy's been pretty good, and so it's easy to start. You all of a sudden look up and you have 3 gym memberships, and you go, well, it's actually healthier to just go run outside. Let's get rid of the 3 gym memberships. Right. So things like that, obviously for the company, and myself have been leaning out. Just really let's make this prepare for if the worst happens, we're okay, and if the best happens, we're lean. We can launch into it. So I think people, the first half is organization. The second half, I think, is just lifestyle, right? They're sitting at home. They're not going to go invest in a newer home or a bigger home or a different home. They're not going to build a new home, but they realize they need space. Yeah. Because now they're sort of back in the 20s. They're spending time at home. Their kids are at home. They need things to do. The 2 hours a day their kids were spending on technology, now they're turning into technology brats because it's 6 hours a day. So they got to get the kids outside, and they want something, so whether it's a craft room or a home office or whatever. So we're really seeing, or the way we see it in the future over the next 6 to 12 months is that's a lot of people are going to get into nesting more than ever before. And so investing in their nest, their home, their backyard is going to be important.
Interesting. What's interesting about that too is one of my best friends here in Nashville, Alan Dixon, is a top performing real estate agent in Nashville. And actually he was just on, was it yesterday, Lincoln? He was talking about, he was building out a company, he was building out a brokerage, and he realized it just wasn't him. And he's a sales guy. He's not a manager, he's not a business owner, he's a sales guy. So he killed that company recently, and just he's under Compass now, and he's just crushing it. I mean, he's a rock star sales guy.
He found his superpower.
Superpower. Yeah. He found like when he was honest with himself, he found like what he was built for. But anyhow, he's not slowing down at all right now, which surprised me. I figured the real estate, it gets soft in Nashville for a few months. It's not getting soft, at least not for him. He's got his leads are strong. He's got closings lined up. He's actually really doing great right now, right in the middle of all of this COVID stuff. Now you mentioned lifestyle structures. Obviously, the storage shed industry is very competitive, and there's a lot of strong competition that would focus on more the commodity, the storage structures, and just kind of focusing in on that. Was your shift to? I assume you still do that, but it's a segment of your business. And was your shift to more lifestyle structures and some of the options and some of the customization, or maybe even some of the feel or the branding,
the experience?
Yeah, the experience. The focus on that, was that because you looked kind of as a strategic thing? You surveyed the market, realized you didn't want to kind of compete at this level. You wanted to be different, and that's where you went after it. Or you saw there was a demand there that no one was. How did you get into that really, specific niche?
Really, probably first it just came from, I don't have any passion for the commodity space. So I'm not interested in selling, 10 million sheds that are just, we happen to be the cheapest, right?
Sure.
And also fundamentally, personally, I love quality, whether it's vehicles, whether it's, I've always been that way. One of my first vehicles I bought was an old Lexus SUV, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't cool. I mean, I was 25 or something. It definitely wasn't a cool car for a 25-year-old.
Yeah.
And it cost me about the same as I could have bought a brand new, cool looking, cheap car, right?
Sure.
So I've always loved quality, something that lasts long, something that's generational, and that just doesn't go with the commodity space. The second aspect is if you look at really the probably the other big driving factor is really helping families live more memorable and organized lives. And while 15 years ago I couldn't have put that into words for you or those words for you, I saw so many folks in the industry just treating a customer like another number, and you see it on, websites and reviews or lack of reviews and et cetera. And just wanting, it's something my father instilled in me. Now, my father was not a business person at all. Unfortunately, lost him to cancer a few years ago. But my father understood one thing, and that is the human connection and what truly is the bottom line, both religiously, in faith and in personal connections. And so he wasn't able to scale the business because he spent hours and hours on one delivery, one install, right?
Right.
Where a really good installer can do 4 or 5 in a day, right?
Yeah.
So I took that sort of passion, and as a young kid growing up, we were sort of like farmers in the aspect that I was helping out in the company before I could ever remember, right?
Right.
But the first thing I really remember when I was probably 4, 5, 6, 8, after school during the summer, is going with my dad to do installs, to do deliveries, and by probably 7, I got good enough. Once he got the shed in place, I'd set it, I'd get it leveled up. I was skinny and young, so I could crawl underneath him. He was not so skinny and young, so it worked out good. So he would shoot the bull with the customer for an hour or 2 hours, and I would get the shed set and come back and wait for him and the family that we were serving to finish up the conversation. And then he'd come and inspect my work and make sure it was good, and off we went. I loved it. He loved it. It was a great deal. But really, I took that foundation and said, how can we serve families? Now,
Right.
our vision and mission is with scale, but in a way that we're not going to scale at the expense of that raving fan customer service. We're not just trying to make people happy. We're not looking for happy customers. We're looking for folks that are absolutely raving fans.
Yes.
And so it became a passion. And so as we started investing into it, we rebranded, we changed a lot of things. But I got to be honest, even today, Kent, I watch customer video testimonials, and I look at photos and videos of what they're doing with the product, and it blows my mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's this vision we had. But yet, on the other hand, you go, do people really actually use their products like this at large scale? And they do, turns out. So people are hungry for unique, personalized spaces, for something that they own, that they help create, they help co-create.
Yes.
And that's somewhere they can add value to their lives, right? And therefore, lifestyle structures.
Absolutely. Well, what I love about that is, people are creative. People are generally capable. I know there's exceptions, but generally speaking, people are innovative, creative, and you see this with I would say Facebook, but even Twitter. Like, you can create something, but if people don't latch on and start using it and making it their own and put their own spin on it, it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, we wouldn't have Facebook the way we have it now if people didn't just sort of grab onto it and start using it, put their own spin on it. Facebook pays attention, then they start catering to that and so forth. Zuckerberg did a great job masterminding Facebook to start, but he didn't mastermind what they have now.
Right.
A lot of that was people just using it.
You got to have the vision and then co-create it with the public in reality.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Back to 7 or 8 years old, riding around with your dad delivering sheds. So I actually didn't know that your dad was in the shed industry when you were that young.
Yeah.
So how did this all start then?
Yeah. So my parents married in '69. My dad and mom moved to Costa Rica. They had 11 kids there, all born in Costa Rica. So we moved back to the U.S. in 1990. in actually Glasgow, Kentucky. So that's the connection back to Kentucky. And in Glasgow, Kentucky, I there again go sit with Dad in our office. We had one location eventually, like when we became a big company, right? The one
this is sheds at this point?
Yeah, sheds at this point. The one that could almost afford to feed the family.
Right.
So, but for us, that was probably when we opened that store in Glasgow, I'm going to say 9 years in. Right. So we were, I don't know, we were probably we don't really keep records back then, but maybe $150,000, $200,000 a year. Right. Sure. So very, very small. And I remember serving customers or watching my dad serve customers there as well. So is it really that, man, I hate to even call it customer service because everybody calls everything in any version of customer service. This morning, unfortunately, all your great hotels in Nashville are shut down right now. So the ones I've stayed at before and really love are not accepting reservations, at least not the ones my assistant could find.
Really?
And the one I stayed in February.
Know that.
Yeah, the one I stayed in February is shut down as well. So anyways, so I stayed at this Homewood Suites by Hilton. And, I forgot my shaver, of course. And so I called to the front desk and terrible service, right? I waited on it for 20 minutes and I finally gave up, right? And so yet they would call that customer service.
Sure.
Right. Yep. Anything that's interfacing with customers, we call customer service. So it's raving fan experience. One of our core values as an organization is passionately exceed customers' expectations. Right. So watching my dad do that, he definitely did it. He didn't do it at scale, but yeah, my father founded the company in 1990. And then
was it Ulrich Barn Builders?
No, it was in Kentucky, obviously, being Kentucky, bluegrass, portable buildings.
Oh, nice.
So there you can really see, just the state, vision for just the state, and then portable buildings, which is, although 70% of our product does get built in the factory and relocated, it's definitely not a focus on that it's portable. It's just it's a way to modularly produce a product, very high quality, very customized, but yet deliver a phenomenal timeline, cost, and quality to the customer. So so my father, I grew up in the industry. I was, 2.5 when my father started the company. So, and then relocated in 2001 to Cleburne, Texas, which is where the factory actually in Texas still is today.
What took the family there?
Church. So my parents, grew up very, Amish Mennonite, very conservative.
Like beachy? Or
no, Amish Mennonite, like some weird mix between Amish and Mennonite.
Okay.
So
we'll get way over people's heads real quick.
Yeah.
Almost more like a Mid-Atlantic.
No, much more conservative than that.
Okay,
so,
gotcha. Now we're getting over my head.
Yeah. So literally like almost Amish, but yet Mennonite.
Gotcha. I see.
So relocating to Texas to be part of a church there, and then eventually my father was really a pastor at heart, right? He loved. That's why I understood the human connection, and he wasn't a Bible thumping, preacher boss kind of preacher. He spent a lot of time. In fact, after he was diagnosed with cancer, I came to his house one morning and he was sicker than a dog, and he literally got up like at 11 o'clock at night and went and bought Pampers for this family who was almost homeless, didn't have a car, at like 1 a.m., went to Walmart, got Pampers and took it to them. He just almost to the extent it was, right, he could have positioned himself differently and helped that many more people.
Sure.
But that wasn't his thing. Scale was never his thing. It was that personal, unique connection and really seeing that one more person learn to know Christ. So impacted, over his lifetime, one at a time, impacted hundreds, if not thousands of people. So definitely a phenomenal legacy. But so that's how I got in the industry. Yeah. So 2001, we rebranded to Ulrich instead of to Lone Star or something else that's gotcha. Back to state level. So
and was it his company at this point when you moved to Texas in 2001?
So he would have owned 100% at that point, and then my next older brother David and him co-founded or rebrand right in Texas. And then I literally dropped out of my first year in high school. So when I completed ninth grade, I bounced out and became the company's first full-time salesperson. So
oh, wow.
We were doing probably $1.2 million at that time. and got into sales and loved it. And that was also by happenstance, back to 8 or 9 years old, watching my dad service customers.
Yeah.
Right. So I sort of had a concept of how to do it.
Yep.
And then I was working in the factory weekends and after school and summer, et cetera. And when no one else was in the office, my father and my brother, the shop foreman would come to me and say, "Hey, you know more about this than the rest of us in here." So I'd get off the roof. I remember one time in particular, I was roofing a 12 by 24 lofted barn, and I got off the roof and we went over and I closed the deal, and it sort of got in my blood. And I realized, that I really do enjoy that serving customers, but at scale. And so, so then, I don't know, it was 3 years later, I think when I was 18, I made a deal with my dad to buy his 50%, pay it over time. Right?
Oh, okay.
He knew I couldn't afford to write him a check because he didn't put a silver spoon in my mouth, and he didn't have one to give me. So I don't blame him. Glad he didn't. Wouldn't be where we are today with that. So, but yeah, I mean, that's sort of the story. And then a number of years ago, bought out my brother. And since then we've done a few other acquisitions, but really all in that focus, right? If it doesn't fit our niche and if it doesn't fit our mission, it's not something we're going to do. So we've actually gotten rid of about 80% of our product because it wasn't in our core.
Interesting. How recently?
That would have been 2015, I believe.
Okay.
About 2015.
Where you cut 80% of your product lines?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so we had just on and on and on and on of products.
Yeah.
So what we've done is we've taken a lot fewer products and made them much more configurable to where folks really can customize. So instead of them pointing at Walmart has thousands and thousands of items, right? But you can't customize them.
Yep.
So instead, we have fewer products, but then you can customize it, make it the way you want it. So,
what were some of the ones you cut? You're talking about like product lines, like say, for example, chicken coops or dog kennels, that type of thing you're cutting, or shed styles?
Mostly other products not in the core business. So,
gotcha.
So dog kennels and et cetera.
Any others that you cut? Because we cut quite a lot of product lines.
We did gazebos, dog kennels.
Were you building
kids'
gazebos?
Playhouses? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Kids playhouse, not kids playhouses, kids playgrounds. Tea houses, patio furniture, and it's interesting is we really had to do that to get to our course. So that was during and we did this, by the way, 2008. I read a book. First of all, I bought into Zig Ziglar's philosophy. He gave me a pen that said, "We choose not to believe in the recession," and in Texas, that was pretty easy to do in 2008 because the recession hadn't hit us there yet.
Right.
But it did hit us later. And I was reading this book. That's where I got a lot of my education, and then watching others' mistakes and successes. And I've made plenty of failures myself, plenty of mistakes myself. Some expensive, some not so expensive.
Yeah.
But all in all, it's a very expensive education, and I'm sure you can relate to that.
Absolutely.
So, and it's so I was reading this book one night. It's probably 1:00 at night, and it was talking about the 80-20 principle, right? 80% of what you do brings 20% of your results. 20% of what you do brings 80% of your results. And I thought, dadgum, that can't be true of us. Come on, right? We're smarter than that. And I think it was about one business day later, it got the best of me. I closed my office door and I pulled out a spreadsheet and I started plugging in numbers. And I think it was 73% of our business was coming from like 25% of our efforts.
Isn't that something how accurate
locations.
that is?
That was on locations.
Okay.
And so we literally shut down. We had 35 locations.
Sales locations.
Yeah. We had 35 locations and we went down. Ultimately, today we have in that same market. Now we have other markets now, but in that same market we have 3 locations.
Wow.
And so we do online as well as stores, and obviously doing significantly more business than we were doing then. So 350% more.
Yeah.
And the next sort of natural to that became product groups. So what's interesting now as we look to the future, though, some of those product groups will be adding back in, but we already have a core. We already have our voice. So at that point, we were still more of a commodity business, trying to sell these things that are lifestyle structures, and that doesn't go very well. So a lot of our client base also didn't jive well with it. They wanted the kids' playground, but they wanted something cheap. Well,
yes,
there's Costco for that, right?
Right.
The one your kid's going to fall off on, and you can't sue because it's outsourced to a third world country where they manufacture it, and et cetera. So it's I think as we go into the future, some of those products will have a big comeback, and we'll carefully and strategically bring some of those back in.
Right. So. Yeah. Fascinating. Back to Did you always know when your dad was running the company? Did you always know that you wanted to be a part of it?
For me, I truly believe in following your passion and just sort of going with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do what you're good at, find something you enjoy at, find your superpower.
Mm-hmm.
I forget it was before we were talking or since you started the podcast of you got to find your superpower. And if you'll really do what you're love doing and what you're good at. And so as a company, we spend a lot of time trying to identify what is our superpower. Because, that's true of organizations. Organizations are living, breathing, organisms just like we are as humans. And so it has its own personality. It has its own things it's good and not good at based upon the makeup, of the sum of its parts. I wouldn't, I'm not looking back when I was 8, 9, 10. No, I never sat there and said, gosh, I want to own the company one day and grow this empire, right? It's not, that was never the mission. I just took one day at a time, put 100% into it, loved it. Things I didn't love, I'll let someone else do, right? And every single day I tried to improve. And I read lots and lots of books, hundreds of books, and lots around the thoughts of self-improvement. And thankfully, I got into the side that's not sort of whatever you believe can happen, which is somewhat true, but depending how it has to come with work ethic, has to come with
focus.
It gets
weird really quick.
It gets weird really quick. So I was blessed to tie in a lot of content like Zig Ziglar and other greats, Jim Collins, and books that are really, I think, still solid and fundamentally solid today. So
yeah, absolutely, man. It was kind of the it was kind of the Wild West back in the day. I remember going with Dad to work whenever I could. And on Saturdays for sure. And Saturdays were busy days for sales. And we had a little tiny sales office, and there we would sell like this wood furniture also. So we'd had wood furniture inside the sales office that people would sit on. And I kid you not, well, this was when this was a few years later than when I was selling too. But you would be at a desk. We were open from, I think at that point, from 9 to 12 on a Saturday, which is kind of funny. It's like you probably should have been open a little later in the day. But 9 to 12, and there's people driving hour and a half frequently. And they would be sitting in this office, like the little office would only hold like maybe 6 couples at a time, 4, 5, 6 couples at a time, full. And sometimes there's people like waiting outside, and I'm just like writing orders.
Right. You know what I mean? Taking.
It was order taking, and it was a dream. Like now, now it's be a dream to have people waiting in line to take your order. But back then it was just kind of expected. And if it got crazy enough, I'd text Mom or call her and be like, I need help. And she'd run over and take some orders. And that way people didn't have to wait too long and get upset and stuff, It's
almost like you were a fast food restaurant, right?
Yeah, it really was. Yeah,
it was Subway and the line's long.
Exactly. But yeah, the sales, that always really intrigued me. I remember selling my younger brother, Ben, he's 3 years younger than I, and I sold him so many sheds just to practice. Like when we were kids, I don't even know how young, probably 7 or 8. And just sold him a bunch of stuff because I'd watched Dad do it and figured, name and address. And back then you had home and work, if you remember that. And then you'd write the directions. It's so crazy. You'd write the directions to get to their house on the back of the order before the days of GPS. Like take a right here and then a left there. And
So I don't know where my dad came up with the idea, but we actually didn't even write down directions because in Kentucky, as you know, the roads are quite narrow. And so most of our installs required a pilot car. So he literally would get the client, I don't know if this would work today, and it's definitely not efficient, but he would get the client to come and escort us from the factory to their home. So they were our directions. They were our GPS.
Interesting.
And he put a wide load sign on their front bumper, and they thought it was the greatest thing.
Oh, I'm sure they thought it was awesome.
Majority. There were some customers who freaked out a bit because they thought they were taking on, the risk and et cetera. Right. But most customers loved it. They're again, I think it's part of that co-creating before that was even a thing, right?
Yes.
Where they were actually involved in the process and they loved it. So
absolutely. I think of those days as sort of the romantic days of the shed industry. Because no one really knew yet what it was, and it was very young. Like customers were very intrigued and fascinated by these mom and pop shops that had their kids riding around with them. They were selling them sheds, delivering sheds. They had their kids involved. They would do the pilot car driving. It was very
crazy.
It was very crazy. It was very kind of mom and pop. it just feels like kind of the romantic days of the industry.
I think for both of us, growing up in the industry, I mean, it's always going to be part of our story and history. And you think back on those days, and I think you lost your father at a much younger age than I did. I was 28, so 4 years ago, I guess. And I always look back on those memories as fond. I don't really remember ever going fishing with my dad or him playing soccer with me. But I remember doing with my father we also did back in the day some custom painting, and I could walk you to the spot on this property in Kentucky where I held a flashlight and helped him fix our spray machine at 11 o'clock at night or something. It felt like 1, but it probably wasn't. He'd probably put me in bed by then. And going with him on deliveries and all these things. Yep. So it's funny as I look back, I don't look back as he was a slave driving me, because that was absolutely not who Dad was. We if anything, he didn't pick up efficiencies enough. Yep. But it just looked super, super fond memories, of looking back on that. So.
Very similar. Do I have a memory of playing catch with my dad? I don't think that I do. I got into Little League soon after he died. And I'm trying to think now. I do remember they would have these weekends. It probably wasn't more than once a year. It felt like a lot, where their old friends would get together and we would play with, the other kids our age. It'd be the adults and their friends. So he loved to do that. He really enjoyed playing games like Monopoly and card games. I just never, it's hard for me to play any kind of games like that, board games and such. It's not my jam. I get bored much too quickly. Oh, really? Yeah. So he did that, but very similar with you. Like, my memories of my dad are riding with him often to go down into Pennsylvania somewhere, probably 2-3 hours away, to pick up gazebos, and he'd leave at like 3 or 4 in the morning, get down there, load. That way he could head home when it was about daybreak, because you can't drive with oversized loads during the night. Yep. I remember a lot of those trips, getting woken up at like 3 a.m. and kind of, laying on the seat beside him. And I remember specifically, I remember specifically kind of like peering at him to see if like he'd want to talk. You know what I mean? Like he was driving. Like, I don't know why I felt like, why he wouldn't. I just felt like, I don't want to disturb him unless he wants to talk. No. And he always did. Going to work with him. Those are my memories of him. And what's interesting about that is extremely fond memories. I don't feel like I got gypped as a child at all, because we weren't tussling all the time, which he totally would. But for me, the takeaway there is that your kids don't have to be the center of the parent's life for them to have a good childhood. Matter of fact, it's probably not good if they are. You're the parent, have your focus, have your vision, and then bring the kids along with you on that.
Right.
And don't make your life as a parent centered around your kids, because the kids can't handle that pressure. That's not even what they're there for. If it's just all about them, then that puts too much pressure on them. So
it's a journey together, right? And then introducing them to that journey.
Absolutely.
And be able to launch on their own eventually successfully.
That's the whole point. It's I think Mariana's mom and dad, which are still Amish, which you might know, but
I do. Great folks.
Yeah, great folks. But I think they were hoping that Mariana would feel a little bit more homesick when we got married and she left home. And I just remember telling Mariana's mom, like, I wouldn't feel bad about that at all. It means you did your job really well. That's the whole point of parenting, Zig Ziglar, self-improvement, reading. When did you get into, and maybe the timeline is different with getting into Zig Ziglar or reading in general, but what resonated with you about Zig Ziglar, and when did you get into his stuff?
So I was 15 when I dropped out of high school. After I completed my first year. But by the way, I love school, right? So I had a professor call me the other day. I had to come in and give a speech to her entrepreneurship class it's a little college, Seventh-day Adventist college close to the factory. And so I said, sure. And so as we're meeting ahead of the presentation, it was very interactive, great group of students. And I told him, I said, some of the board and the president, I think, knew that I had dropped out of high school, but I don't think she did. And I said, I guess, I actually dropped out. So that's part of my story. And I'm going to talk about that.
Sure.
So now I don't recommend it to others. Right. I don't walk around, and I didn't go into that class and say, and what was funny is she actually stopped me as I said that to the class and said, no, I'm telling you, if you guys have something to go do, you don't need me, go do it.
Oh, wow.
So she was actually, not in the right context,
Right,
encouraging
right.
people.
Yep.
School, I think we sometimes think is going to set us up. It helps us. It helps us figure out it arms us with the right tools and knowledge and resources.
Yep.
If you're set out to do something.
Yes.
Right. But it's like putting gas in the car, but you don't have an engine or a GPS, right? It's not going to do you any good.
Yep.
So back to Zig Ziglar. So I started reading. I love school, but I was bored. And frankly, you know, at that point, I thought I saw an opportunity in the company. And so I chose, and you know, a lot of people go, how did your parents deal with that? Well, you can understand my parents didn't go to college, right? The rest of my family didn't go to high school even, because in Costa Rica, most of my older siblings, because I'm next to the youngest, they went through their elementary school or primary school was through grade 6. Right. So I was already grade 9. I had educated myself. Yeah, I was doing good. But I think the education, I mean, had I stopped my education there or just taken a normal education path from there of what most folks learn the next 10 years, it wouldn't have been good for me. Right. But I jumped out and I started reading really from the time I was 15. And I read, I mean, I would go to Borders Books, you know, now Amazon Books, and I'd buy like 10 books. I'd read through those in a few weeks, and then I go back and I buy another 10, and I go back and I buy another 10. And I read, you know, I probably read 10, pleasure reading books in my life, right? So I always loved, I mean, a lot of these are fiction books, Pat Lencioni's books, right?
Yep.
Jim Collins' books. I mean, they're fiction, but they're based on their studies in real life of business and teams and all these other things. So I went to I'd read quite a bit of Zig's content, signed up for his class, went with my brother and a few other friends, and we went to his old Born to Win series seminar. So it was, if I remember right, 3-day seminar.
Where was
in Dallas?
this?
In Dallas, they're close to his corporate office. I was 17.
You were 17.
And Ziglar has Tom and other folks have now, his son Tom's great person, by the way. They do a Born to Win series, Born to Win seminar, but it's a different seminar than what it actually, you know, obviously was back then under Zig. And so the whole thing, I got a certificate at the end of this, and I still have it on my office wall. Growing up conservative Amish Mennonite, you didn't hear these words a lot generally, right? But my parents, big time, taught me this, and so it gave me the sort of really. I was sort of broken out of the shell already, then it really encouraged and sort of pushed me over the edge. And he gave me the certificate, and it said, his philosophy was, you're born to win, right? God, Ziggs obviously was a believer. God made you to win, right? For his purpose, but God made you to win. You just have to find what that is and go do it and go kill it. And that was a monumental piece of what I think, foundation that launched me into the rest of life. And so that was when I was 17. And then we engaged with the Ziglar organization over the next probably 10 years to come in and do sales training and, motivational speeches. And I've given, every book out there, I've probably given more Zig books away than anything else. So,
oh, yeah.
And then, another fundamental book was Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? It's sort of a life skills 101 book, in my opinion. So, and that also goes, Zig obviously was or Carnegie was a forerunner to Zig. And so all of that, I don't know, it just really hit home with me on God has put us here for something bigger and greater, and he has a purpose and a mission. And whether that's a pastor or a business person for kingdom good, or a doctor, a nurse, a homemaker, it doesn't matter what it is. The vocation's not the point; it's the calling, right? So I think we talk about there's the old, I don't remember the story now, but the old painter, right? And he's painting this masterpiece, and he's really just painting a building. And I can't bring the story to mind right now, but it's doing everything. It's actually biblical teaching, as unto the Lord.
Yes.
You're not flipping burgers from McDonald's. You're flipping burgers not for the customer. Ultimately, you're flipping burgers as unto the Lord. So do it the absolute daggum best you can, right? With passion and integrity and quality.
Yeah, that's a very biblical principle. And my example for that was my grandfather. My grandfather, Ben Lapp, on my dad's dad. And, he wasn't a flashy man. He wasn't a fancy man. He wasn't a businessman. He was very faithful. You know, he was a peach farmer, and he did a great job over many, many years, and he did his work as unto the Lord, you know? And so, yeah, you're totally right. I remember what got me into reading business books. I was probably 20 or 21, and I enjoyed school also. And but for whatever reason, didn't really get into reading business books in my teenage years. And we were at a trade show in Vermont. It was Marianne and I, so we were married, no kids. But I had hauled a horse barn up there and was working the show that weekend. And we had gotten there on a Thursday or something to set up, and the show didn't start until the next day. So we went to Barnes and Nobles and just kind of killing time, looking through books and stuff. And grabbed Good to Great by Jim Collins, because I had heard, you know, a little bit about him in the book and things. And so there it was. So just grabbed it off the bookshelf in Barnes and Noble, sat down on the bench. And
I see it on the bookshelf behind you right there.
Yeah.
It is. Good to Great.
That's not the book from, I don't know. It's not, unfortunately, but, and just read for a couple hours and just got sucked in, man. I could not put it down. Just the concepts were fascinating. And then that's what started my love for reading nonfiction business books and self-help and self-improvement. And then I did go through a phase at some point then in the next 5 to 7 years where it got a little weird. I think I allowed it to get to a place that maybe it shouldn't have. Maybe it became a little bit of an idol. And so when you mentioned, you know, reading self-improvement books and self-development books and personal growth and business nonfiction type books and things, you know, taking care not to let it get out of whack. You know, keep it in its proper place.
You know, as you're talking, it sort of reminded me of, I think where it gets out of whack is when we think we can pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, right? What Song of Solomon says, or not Song of Solomon, Proverbs or Ecclesiastes, I forget, talks about there's nothing new under the sun, right?
Yes, Ecclesiastes, yes.
Ecclesiastes. And so I think that's an important, as we read these things, you know, Jim Collins, it's not original with him. He's discovering principles that are timeless, right? And if they're not timeless, then it's probably going to get weird. Right? If it's some kind of new idea that nobody's ever heard of before, maybe it's not solid, maybe it's not something you should be looking at. But if you look at, you know, all the way back to Scripture, and, you know, I'm just going to pick 3 points. You go Scripture, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and a lot of his other books. A lot of things match there, right? I think Jesus, in fact, there's a book out there, you know, The Greatest Salesman Who Ever Lived. I think Jesus was the greatest salesman who ever lived, right? And it's not some kind of used car salesman tactic. It's true servant leadership. It's true servanthood, not subservient, as you know, Dave Ramsey's obviously, you know, close by here, and I love, you know, it's servant leadership is not subservient. It is servant leadership. You're serving from a position of authority or power, but it's all from service for the greater good. That's something that's great for the community, for the folks that you're serving, for your own family, right, and ultimately, you know, for the kingdom, hopefully. I think those books that are not tying you into those timeless principles, it gets weird. And also those books that sort of lead you to a fundamental mindset that I can sort of pull myself up by my own bootstraps. The principles, and I think you would echo this, the principles that I've learned have just been applying. The pulling myself up by my own bootstraps is just simply getting out of my own daggum way, right? Putting aside my weird ideas, putting aside laziness or selfishness or pride or whatever it is, and just going and actually being willing to plug into the real stuff, right? And applying that, right? So we do have to do that, right? Jesus had 12 disciples. One did, one didn't, 11 did. So we do have to apply ourselves. There's the part we have to play, but these principles are much greater than me or you or Jim Collins or anybody else, right?
I totally
it's
agree.
Timeless.
I totally agree. And I think there's something in there that's a case for a creator too, because if you think about how, the thing is, I just don't know what to do with beauty if there's not a creator. How do you explain beauty if there's not a creator? And, you know, the obvious ones are like the beauty of creation, because there's things in creation that are just not necessary for the ecosystem. Like, you know, you can pull out this caterpillar here or this fish that lives so deep in the ocean, we don't actually know what it's there for or really what it eats or what it what eats it. You know what I mean? Like you can pull out a few things and you don't lose anything. There's things that are what seem to be there. And it's possible that there's things that they're there and we don't even know their meaning yet.
Right.
But there are things in creation. How do you explain away the beauty of creation without a creator?
But math and science, right? How orderly it is and how predictable it is.
That's exactly where I was going. Is another thing I think we think about a lot less is the beauty of our natural laws. And so that's why I think these books that can make such a big difference, ultimately they're going to tie back into principles in Scripture, because it's not just because the Scriptures are a really good book and happen to get a lot of things right. It's because actually, what does Proverbs say? It says something along the lines of, by wisdom God formed the earth. And so there's a sync for society. There's a way of doing things. There's a way you can plug into society and structure and creation that works.
Right.
And then there's a lot of ways that if you try to do that don't. And so these principles, the ones that stick and the ones that make a difference, are ultimately just tying back into like the rules of nature and creation and how humans work. Science is a great example. And math is probably my favorite example, because like it or not, 2 + 2 = 4. You can fool around with it. You can try to change. It's not going to change. It doesn't matter how you talk about it. It just is. You can't change it.
That's right.
And so there's these rules that God has kind of created that govern things, and tying into like a way that things work with society or interpersonal relationships. Like that stuff is not just kind of fluky, fly by night, weird. Like it actually is true.
And that ties into another one of Zig's things he talks about is that had a huge impact, and I would have probably been from that same 3-day seminar. But if you help enough other people get what they want, you'll get what you want, and that's back to servant service again, right? And that's ultimately what Jesus did. Jesus came here because he wanted something, right? I mean, he died, and that's a big deal. But he did it because he wanted something. But he had to be unselfish to be able to get that.
Sure.
Instead of being power grabbing, money hungry, truly selfish, then you're not going to get it. So we talk about you may have heard the concept of the upside down kingdom, right? And so many laws are that way. If you truly think about it, this is my opinion, not original with me, but if you truly actually want to be selfish, right? At the end of the day, you want a really good life, you have to be unselfish. Sort of weird, right?
Right.
But if you don't care about being selfish, you just sort of as a concept think it's great, you can go out and be selfish and you're not going to have, you're not going to have anything. You're not going to have true joy and true happiness and all the rest of it. So it's sort of that upside down kind of thing. And then what's weird is just how it all ties together. So, if you get in a plane to go deliver water to a disaster zone, right? Drinking water, for example, the disaster zone, you're doing good and investing in others. That's great. But while that one law that you're actually carrying out the mission, there's a million others. There's gravity working for you, right? There's Bernoulli's principles, all these different principles that just make flight possible for you to be able to take off, and then you pull back the power and gravity pulls you down. That's without gravity, you could never go give the water to anybody.
Right.
And so it blows my mind sometimes, especially when I'm flying, just to think about what's the core principle, can't even really call it the core principle, right? We have those as organizations and as humans, but what's that core to like God's creation principle, right? Yes. What do you call that? The timeless principle, or what are those principles that we're living out in one particular act that we're doing? All the things that have to work together, all those principles that without one of them, it wouldn't work.
Yes,
totally. Amazing.
That's, one of the things that stuck out to me the most when I was learning to fly back in, I don't know, probably 2013.
I didn't know you would fly.
Yeah. It was right before we moved to Nashville. I was doing cross country solos. Okay. And then we moved to Nashville, and I haven't picked it up since. So I haven't flown since 2013, probably. Wow. But man, I really
need to go for a ride tomorrow.
That would be fun. I did not expect to enjoy it as much as I did. Yeah. But one of the things that really stood out to me was how you have to understand the laws that govern flight and be in accordance with them. Yeah. It's very matter of fact. You know what I mean? You can wish it was different. You can hope it was different. You can try to make it different. It's not going to be different. You have to understand speed, airspeed, all of these different things that it's just very matter of fact. If you know how it works and you operate in accordance with the principles, you're going to have a great flight. It's going to be very fun. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be safe, and it's going to be awesome. If you try to fudge a system, you die.
And the great thing I think about that is whether you understand it or not, it's going to be that way.
Exactly.
And then you can also I'm sort of a practical person, and sometimes probably not fun to be around because of that. But if you just think about it, I know people in my life who just get absolutely enthralled with why gravity works. I don't really care. Me personally, right? I don't really care why gravity works. I just know that it is always going to work that way. And so then I have to behave in such a way that I put gravity on the good side of things, not the bad side, right? I can use it to land the plane. I can use it for, for skiing down a hill, which is fun. I can use it to go skydiving, which I haven't done. Or you can choose not to pay attention, even if you don't understand why gravity, which I really don't. I don't understand why gravity works that way. Simply I do, but not really fundamentally or in detail. You can either choose to live by the principle or not live by the principle. And I think if we had to understand all the principles to be able to bring it all together, like the core of the principle and why it works that way, that'd be pretty complicated. So God made it in such a way where you don't even really have to understand it. You just have to understand X is X, Y is Y.
Yeah, you're right about that. Totally right. Who are you paying attention to today, or who are you getting inspiration from or learning from today?
So I think, as I've gotten older, I obviously still read, not as much as I used to, but I read quite a bit. Pat Lencioni, the company went from a phase of just start with Zig Ziglar. That was me understanding how wonderful God made me and every other team member in the company and other human in my life and other humans I don't know, obviously. And then, that's just leading yourself, right? And then it got into things like Jim Collins. It sort of graduated into things like, or changed into things like Jim Collins on building a company or building an organization that goes from good to great. And understanding the nuances of what really makes it go from good to great. Some things are obvious, some things are not so obvious. And then I found a lot of value in Pat Lencioni's work, and we still use a lot of his things at the company and principles. So Pat Lencioni's work on really building a great team, right? So you've got this organization you're trying to build, and you have a mission and a BHAG and all these things that Jim talks about. But guess what? You got to have people to go make it happen. So one of the things I've actually enjoyed is Dave Ramsey's EntreLeadership events that he does, because he brings together a lot of it. I've done I went to his first one, and I've been through to everyone since then. This year I'm going to miss it because they changed the date. My wife and I are going to be in Bora Bora for our anniversary, and so probably not going to make that one. But we're going to take, as a team, we'll do that one virtually, and then we'll be with them next year again. But what I've enjoyed about it is just, Dave's obviously just a great guy and very forthright on how things are, and sharing his journey of bankruptcy and all these other things, which is phenomenal. But then also the amount or the concentration of great thought leaders, right? So Pat Lencioni and Jim Collins and Simon Sinek and
Alan Mulally was there a couple years ago, right?
So all these great. It's sort of a mecca of bringing those people together.
Henry Cloud.
So I get probably practically in the team building. That's a big thing for us as we go into the future at Ulrich. It's Pat Lencioni's work is phenomenal. Staying close to Jim Collins' work. I see a bunch of my favorite books actually on your bookshelf here. So we've implemented EOS as an organization. So Gina Wickman's work. Our implementer for that program is Mark Winters, and he wrote. I don't see yours.
He wrote, Mark Winters, I think, wrote Rocket Fuel.
Yes, he wrote Rocket Fuel. That's
Gina
correct.
Wickman, right?
That's correct. That's correct. So, working through that, I realized this need after I bought my brother out. I was serving as CEO and president, and so sort of working with who wrote the book around finding your superpower, your why, the ground hedgehog principle. I can't think of it.
The hedgehog principle is Jim Collins.
Jim
right?
Collins, yes,
Yeah.
Jim Collins. And so doing that individually as a person too, I realize, what do I enjoy doing as we go into the next phase of, the next decade at the company? What am I really good at? What do I enjoy? And so based on that and help, I was already down that path, which is why I really, why Gino Wickman and Mark Winter's work really sort of connected with me versus some of the other systems I had looked at. And so last year, mid-year, I hired a integrator, a president for the company, for the Texas branch. And then obviously the other markets have a market president as well. But that's been a game changer as well for me personally, not just as an organization, but me personally. Here's the way I look at it. Bottom line, Kent, is you always have to stay ahead of the curve, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're leading an organization or leading your family, your oldest son is 9. Mm-hmm. My oldest son, Taylor, is 8. I've got to stay ahead of that.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're getting older. You're the same way, right? They're getting older. And if we don't constantly change and improve and learn new skills, guess what? We're going to get left behind. And you and I probably both know parents who we saw that happen to, right? They didn't change. They didn't stay ahead of the curve, or in business or church or whatever area it is, I think. And so it's just interesting, the things that I've never really thought about this question until you just asked it. What triggered it is, what are you currently ingesting and reading material? But I think it's sort of followed my need. What am I looking for? What am I struggling with? And then I go find content that can speak to that, right? Because guess what? There's people who spend their entire life studying about this problem I'm having. Why do I need to recreate the wheel? Let me just go learn from those timeless principles and find what's right. And for it's unique for each individual, but in the grand scheme of things, it's all the same truth.
Yeah, absolutely. What's fascinating about what you just mentioned, that kind of trajectory is very similar to my personal trajectory too, with the books that I got into and the needs at the time and which ones you were paying attention to and things like that. This book, Rocket Fuel, this is one of my favorite business books of all time, but I only stumbled upon it. It's November of 2016. Okay. Referred by Brian Huddleston. I always write that on the inside of any book that I read now. So if someone refers a book, I like to notate it. But the Rocket Fuel, it's basically it's all about the integrating with visionary and an integrator and how they can work together. And it's just basically the idea that, everyone knows Warren Buffett, but a lot of people don't know there was someone behind the scenes that was just really making things work. What's another great example? Walt Disney. What's Walt's brother's name? I forget. But there was another Disney. Like Walt has a brother. I don't even know his name. I can't even remember his name right now. You know what I mean? He doesn't get he's not the front man. He doesn't get kind of the recognition that Walt Disney did. But we wouldn't have Disneyland. We wouldn't have this great empire that Walt Disney built without the integrator.
Absolutely.
So where do you fall on the visionary integrator scale? Do you have a little bit of both, or are you strong one or the other?
I think the original, they have sort of a visionary integrator test or a survey that they do. I think it was like 92% visionary. Okay. It may have been 94. They just came out and re-released sort of an updated version of that. And so I took that, I think it was last week maybe. Oh, wow. As recently as last week, and I think I got a 92 on it. So I really don't enjoy management. Yep. I enjoy casting a vision and trying to encourage people to get there. I don't enjoy busting their chops every day to stay at work. Now, I've been able to make the call, the hard call. It's not something I enjoy, but when you have to separate, right? Because the way I look at it, there's 8 billion people in this world, or roundabout, right? And we have 175 jobs as an organization. We're not going to be the right job for everybody, right? Doesn't make that person a bad person just because they don't fit in one of the seats on our bus.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
And so it's I've been able to make a lot of those hard calls as we've grown. I mean, growing from $1 million to where we are today. There's obviously been a lot of transition, and some people want to continue to grow and invest in themselves. Some people, life circumstances change. Some people, the job changes, and so it just doesn't work. But I really don't enjoy that day to day, making sure the trains run on time, managing the P&L, et cetera. And so Chris Pendergrass is the gentleman I hired as president, and I think he's on a trajectory to become our nationwide president. And he is absolutely loves doing those things. He's good at it. He enjoys it. He has fun doing it. And so it's really I'm having to go sort of like what I was individually having to invest in myself as an individual with Zig Ziglar. Today, as CEO, as visionary, how do I sort of remake myself and stay ahead of the curve and be able to lead? Because an organization at $1 million is very different than at 20 million. It's very different than at 50 million. It's very different than at 100 million. It's very different than at $1 billion or 6 billion or 12 billion, right? I mean, organizations change, and you have to stay ahead of that. And I'm 100%. I mean, listen, I think back when we were, $8 million, I was a pretty good president. As we grew and things changed and we had another level of leadership in the company, I wasn't so good of a president. And I was lucky enough, to sort of been born and then placed in an environment in my family where it's okay not to be good at everything.
Sure.
Recognize it, deal with it, and then coming across the work that Gino and Mark did and really helped me put into words something that I felt, something I was okay with, something I talked about openly at the company, and figure out what's missing and being able to fill that in. So it's just. It's you're sort of taking me back on a trip of the books and my journey. But it's interesting. Interesting. And it sounds like very similar to your journey.
Very similar. And even kind of which books I started with and how we kind of went through. Entrepreneurial leadership was very helpful to us in our business years ago. Very helpful. I think this concept is very important for both visionaries and integrators to grasp. Absolutely. Because I think sometimes there's integrators that want to be a visionary and feel like that's kind of the epitome, that's kind of the best maybe. But that's not necessarily the case. No. Like the best is doing what you're built for.
Absolutely.
And this was the huge takeaway from Alan Dixon the other day. The best is just doing what you're built for. And so for the integrators, just if that's you, just realizing, no, it's okay. It's okay if you're not a visionary. That is very okay. Because guess what? Every organization needs you. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Matter of fact, there's more demand for the integrators than the visionaries because you generally only need a visionary in an organization. Right. Sometimes you need a lot more than one kind of integrator. But then also on the flip side, with the visionary, and this was a lesson that I wish I had learned better 15 years ago, is the absolute necessity for and value of integrator. And because if you get around kind of certain cultures in businesses or certain types of people, unfortunately, sometimes will overlook the value of a really strong, really capable integrator. And because, look, sales, you need sales for sure, but if the train gets off the tracks,
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. You can't outsell yourself.
We had right down the street from our factory in Cleburne. There's a major interchange, and one day this coal train came through there, and the coal trains run quite long in Texas. And this thing was blowing right through town. It goes under the overpass, and I don't know how fast it was going. It had been going 60 or 70 at least from what I saw. I wasn't there when it happened, but it somehow got off the tracks right in town, and it piled up, right? And there was probably 10 or 15 carloads of coal that just stacked up on top of each other. And so there were all the cells, right?
Right.
But the train got off the track because the integrator wasn't there, wasn't doing his job, or didn't have the right person. And guess what? All that coal is just turned now into a liability. So it's very interesting concept you bring up.
Great point. Yeah. How about, what are some of the things you think through when in arriving at the decision that someone needs to be moved on versus they just need some more help? How would you think through that?
So I think it's always, turnover costs a lot. Words I don't want to use here on your podcast. Right. I mean, turnover is very, very, very expensive.
Yep.
Super expensive. And so anytime you can invest in a person, either to move them, so we use EOS as terminology, which really comes from Jim Collins and Pat Lencioni, of right people, right seat. So Jim Collins talks about right seats, the right different seats on the bus. Pat Lencioni talks about the ideal team player, which is the right person. And so we use sort of a trifecta of things. One is we use a program called Culture Index. So has a 92% validity rating scientifically on your natural sort of personality style, right? Is your A trait, B trait, C trait, D trait. So
culture index.
Culture index. You may have heard of DISC.
Similar to DISC.
So it all started with DISC back in the 50s or whenever that was. DISC, though, unfortunately, is under the threshold to be able to use legally for hiring and firing decisions per Department of Labor. You got to be, I think, at 70% validity rating scientifically. So there's a lot of different organizations out there. So Zig actually introduced me to DISC as well, and we used that. It was a nice tool to use in sales, so just for salespeople to quickly. Okay, is this guy high A, low B? In DISC they call it DISC. Is he dominant or not? Is he influential or data driven? Is he sociable or introvert? Is he conscious? So there's DISC. ABCD is really. Are you risk taker or risk averse, right? Do you like to lead and manage through people or through data? Do you like to, are you a single task focused, patient, process driven, or are you very multitask focused, impatient? And then the D are in ABCD, the D is, are you high attention to detail, low attention to detail? Right. So we use that as about 33% of our equation for looking at people. The second thing that we look at is our core values. Right. So if you don't fit our core values, and that's sort of almost any one of these things can X a person, but we look at all three of these things to get to the absolute best hire or best promotion. These three things have to be true. So if it doesn't meet our core values, we're not going to have a long-term future, right? You could be a heck of a salesperson. Outsell everybody in the country, but if you don't meet our core values, it doesn't matter. And then the third piece of it is really the right seat, which is we use GWC. So do they get what it takes? So we design a seat on our accountability chart, and I have 3 to 5 roles in my seat. My integrator, Chris, has 3 to 5 roles in his seat. My head of ops, head of finance, salesperson, or somebody who works in the factory, on station 1, on the shed line, right? There's a few things they're responsible for. All of what we do, everything I do as CEO comes down to 3 or 4 things.
Yes.
Right? You have to bring it down to what's truly important. And so in that, then we judge myself, or my integrator, or a new hire, or somebody that's struggling. And so we do this quarterly, actually, across the board from A to Z. We do this quarterly, and once a year, every employee actually rates their supervisor. My integrators, my market presidents rate me. Often than once a year. I do it with me, but for the rest of the company, it's once a year. And then every quarter, the supervisor meets with their direct reports, and they go through this quarterly conversation, basically. It's just a casual conversation, not an HR event.
Yep.
And we're looking for right person, right seat, right? So do you meet the core values? You're already on the bus. So the culture index sort of at that point, we look to it as interesting, but you're already on the bus. We're going to try to put you in the right seat.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So if you're right person, that means you meet the core values. If you meet the core values, you know what? You're our kind of guy or gal. You should be on this bus. It's great. But then we got to find the right seat for you. So I've had folks in the past who are right people, core values, great fit. Absolutely do not have a right seat for them. Right? And being a right seat is GWC. Do they get what it takes? All the ins and outs of the seat. Do they want it? Do they really, truly every day wake up? You talked about your friend who realized what he wants is just to sell. He doesn't want to run a business. He don't want to worry about payroll and all these other things.
Yep.
He found his superpower. So does he truly want it? It's not, I want it because I don't know what else I'm going to do right now. It's not, I want it because otherwise I'm going to get fired or not have a position in this company and I really like it. It's truly sort of viscerally they want it. And then the capacity. Capacity is, so if it's a gets it or want it issue, they're in the wrong seat. We try to find another seat. If we don't have another seat, then unfortunately, they need and I even hate to say unfortunately, fortunately, they need to get off our bus. Because it's fortunate for us that we've discovered it. It's fortunate for them that we've discovered it. We've had situations of separation in the past, and it's brutal on me to have to go through it, right? Brutal on that individual. Because we're looking at the small picture, not the big picture. And a year down the road, I meet this person and say, thank God. And I'm not trying to be Pollyanna and say it happens all the time, but it has happened. And they go, thank God that happened, because now today, this is where I'm at. And it's so much better than anything. I would have never done it myself, but because of the external pressure, of the separation,
Yes.
I went on to do it. So the capacity is the only thing that really, if you're in that, if you're a right person, core values match, and just say you're in a sales seat and you get it and you want it, but maybe you don't have the product training or the process training or the brand voice training, the things that you can really learn, the capacity things, then we're going to invest time with you.
Yeah.
If it's G or W or core values, we give you basically a 90-day window to improve. We meet with you weekly, and then it's over with. Because look, the sooner you and I both figure out if you're the right person or not for the company, the sooner you're going to get to what is right for you.
Absolutely. I
Whether here or somewhere
100%
else.
agree. 100% agree.
So sorry for the long answer to your question.
No. I think that's really great. I couldn't agree more with that. I think I don't know how you've had success or not with, if someone's not a good fit with core values, if you've had success with helping them to become a good fit. I don't want to be pessimistic, but most of the time, if they're not a good fit, you can't train it. You can't teach it. You can't change it.
Again, there's 8 billion people and there's 175 seats in my organization. We're not the right fit for everybody, right?
Yep.
And my core values aren't right for everybody. There's nothing, I think some of them are probably timeless and every organization should have. But the reality is, not every organization needs to be a grow or die core value organization, right? Or a never give up. I mean, sometimes you have organizations that is the opposite of that, and it's the right thing. It's what they're trying to do.
Yes.
So it's. I think someone who doesn't meet those core values, don't try to change other people.
I agree.
You know what I finally
agree.
learned. This is the way I say it, sort of comically, but I think it's true for me, anyways. If Jesus can't change someone against their will, who the heck do I think I am?
Sure.
Right? I mean, really, it's pointless.
Yep. No, I agree. I think, and
we're not communists either. We're not trying to change people against their will. Come on.
Exactly. Yeah. I totally agree with that. Now, how have you found, not even just with your business, but this is just kind of an observation. It seems to me most people, certainly most, nearly all, but most put they don't have that objective outlook when they get laid off or moved on about like, okay, well this is not a good fit for me, so they're moving me on. That's going to be good for that company. It's going to be good for me. It's not a knock on who I am as a person. I don't have to take this too personally. And when they hired me, they didn't commit to hire me for the rest of my life. Matter of fact, they didn't even commit to hire me for the next 5 years. It was a job at will. I took this job at will. They gave me employment. They paid me. This is going to work as long as it's mutually beneficial. And if and when it's not mutually beneficial anymore, we're going to part ways. Most people don't have that objectivity. Most people, it's crushing and it's difficult and they don't see it. And then it's only months later or sometimes a while later when they see like, okay, well that was actually, I get it now.
Right.
You know what I mean? What is it is this an American culture thing? Is this a first world problem? What is it that there often is a lack of objectivity on the behalf of the team members?
I think part of that's generationally, and I don't want to misquote the wrong person, but he talks about all the different generations and the greatest generation, Gen X and Y and millennials and baby boomers. And it's one of the speakers we just talked about. I think it's Simon Sinek, I believe, that talks about it.
I think it is, yeah.
And so, back in the day, back in your grandfather and my grandfather's time, you had a job for 30 years. You went to General Motors and you retired from General Motors, right? You were a farmer, and when grandpa died, then you took dad's place, and dad died, you took his place. And it was just this generational, we farmed for hundreds of years, right? Consecutively. So I think that's changing. In fact, now in some positions that we hire, if someone's had a job for 30 years, I don't think they're going to be a great fit because there's something that, if you're in the same position for 30 years, and I need you to be a thought leader, you're probably not going to be a thought leader. Now, if I need a strong sales professional, if you've been in sales your whole life, that's probably a great thing. But if you need to be creative or an idea generator or a research and development, being too stale for too long. And again, it's sort of like anything we talk about, being patient and impatient. There's a time when being impatient is good, and a seat that being impatient is good. Visionary seat, being impatient is very good, right? Trying to reconcile your bank accounts, your general ledger accountant. You need to be patient.
Right.
You need to be single task focused.
Yeah.
You know, if I tried to do that, we'd be bankrupt because we wouldn't have financials, right? I mean, it's just the way it is. So all of these things, it's not good or bad. And that's back to the concept earlier of your superpower, your why. Find what that is. Visionary, integrator. One's not better than the other. If you'll just find what you're great at, what you love doing, you'll never work another day in your life. And you know, we say that, but really, you'll never work another day in your life. I started becoming miserable when I was managing and making sure the trains run on time. I wasn't enjoying what I'm doing. I'm back to loving what I'm doing, right? And I've seen that whether me or a team members had to step out or step up or step sideways or step down in another position, we're happiest when we're doing what we're really meant to do. So what 100%. Good does it do? What good does it do to become, you know, a sales manager versus a salesperson? Okay, you're going to make more money, but not for long because soon you're going to be fired because you're doing a bad job.
Exactly.
What good does it do to become a president if you're a head of operations because you're actually really good at running a department, but not multiple departments? What good does it do if you want to be the CEO when you don't really get jacked up by vision, right? And what you really get jacked up on is just really running efficiently, right? Really leaning out an organization and making sure it's solid foundation going for growth into the future. So it's ultimately, I think if you play the long game and look at the long game, it becomes much more obvious that you should just do what you're good at.
100%.
That doesn't mean you don't invest in yourself, right? And that we should invest in our team members and help them to grow, but don't think that there's somehow, if you don't give a promotion to this employee every 5 years, they go in a different role, you ruin people by doing that.
Yes.
Some people, it's the right thing. Some people, it's not, based on what they're good at.
Yep, for sure. Well, I think it was just Alan again. He was selling pest control and he was leading his sales office all 4 years he was there in sales. He applied for a promotion, got turned down because someone else was just a better fit. And that's what got him into real estate. And now he's making much more, selling real estate than selling pest control. So his denial of that promotion at the time was not good news for him. It's not what he wanted. In the grand scheme of things, it's exactly what should have happened.
You know, you have one of the best stories that I know personally, I think, right here in your backyard with Ramsey. You know, I mean, if you went to his course, I forget what, Mastermind or I forget what they call it, and he goes over to the office where he went bankrupt and talks about that. And
does he really?
Yeah.
Is it Entree Leadership? Is
Entree
it
Leadership.
through Entree Leadership or no?
Yeah, it's the
master.
It's
what
the
do they
old.
call it?
It's the old one. It's the one he used to do. I think it's Entree Leadership Master Series. Entree Leadership Master Series.
They go to the office where he went bankrupt.
They go to the office where he went bankrupt, and it was freaking cold. So they had to get his hand warmers to stay warm. And
really,
but if you look at what happened there, and it's always easier to see in others than in my own story or yours, our own story. But if he had not went bankrupt, he would not be where he is today and have the impact.
True.
Right?
It's so true.
So it doesn't matter if you're a CEO and you go bankrupt, or if you're a secretary or a receptionist or a factory worker or a sales manager or a VP or a president or a CEO, a board chairman. Don't fight life.
Right. Yes.
Don't fight life. Life often, if we're open, life points us in the right direction.
Yes.
But you gotta, how do you surf? I'm not a great surfer. I went one time and I'm not very good at it. I had a sore neck for like 2 weeks, but you go with the flow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's one concept. And the other concept, it's like the airplane. You always want to land into the wind because it takes less energy. But that's also just learning about life and going with the flow, really.
Yes.
Even though you're going against the flow, the airflow, it means you need less runway to land, less runway to take off, takes less power to take off, right?
Yes.
So we're back to talking about principles again.
Yeah.
And laws of nature.
You can't get away from them. Well, I don't think I properly learned the laws of nature when I tried surfing. I tried it one time. It was in Hawaii. I did not have instruction, which was mistake number one. And mistake number two was I was not wearing a full body wetsuit. So I rented a board, started to paddle out. And I'm a pretty decent snowboarder and snow skier and, have some decent balance with those types of things. Never got hardcore into skateboarding, but could a little bit, So I figured, I'm going to be able to pick this up. It can't be that hard. And there was sand that was rubbing me, like you're paddling out, and it starts to hurt because the sand starts to kind of grate on you. And I could not figure out, I felt like I was not going anywhere. I was trying to get out to where you needed to be to surf, and it was so hard, man. The waves would come along, and you're just paddling and paddling and paddling. What really got me, though, dude, was there was 2 girls that jumped on their surfboard when I was about halfway out to where we needed to be. And, dude, they just, I don't know what they were doing different. They were just buzzing. They passed me, and they got out there like double the time that I was. And from looking at it, they were doing the exact same thing.
But it was so effortless.
It was so effortless. So they were doing something that I couldn't pick up on. And I almost just quit then. But I got out there and tried it, and it wasn't great, man. It really wasn't great. I think I need instruction.
But I even got instruction, and I wasn't great at
really?
it. So
it's so
I think I got it one time. So
how about I'm even curious if you have, in hindsight for you, like if you have made a mistake where in the time was like, oh crap, but then time kind of proves that was actually a good thing. Anything like that? Mistakes you've made that actually have turned out to be positive then in the long run?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be very hard to sit here and be able to think and talk about all the mistakes. A lot of them have been bad, right? A lot of them have been bad. So, but think about a mistake that turned out for the good. I can think about a sales manager that I hired when we were going from basically I was CEO and president, leading the senior leadership team. So I was integrating all these different departments, trying to integrate the vision into the company, but then I'll also integrate sales and operations and marketing and et cetera. And it worked for a while. We scaled from, I don't remember, it was probably 8 million to 15 or 18 million during that time frame. But then it got to where I couldn't keep it all together anymore. And going through, there was some hires that I made that were mistakes, for sure, looking back in hindsight, but it opened my eyes. It made me, I beat my head up against the wall. I got some pretty bad bruises, lost a lot of money, and it made me really stop and get serious about understanding what needs to happen before we go into the next phase. Yep. And I think also that's that I talked about the sales one, but that same time period is what also made me realize I need a president. So if I had made some really good hires on the senior leadership team, I would probably not be where we're at today, because I would have said things are going pretty well, and I would have had the same issues then, but at a larger scale instead of where we did. So so I think that's a great example of where, man, it was brutal. It was head of ops and head of sales, both 2 different people. But it's what made me realize. I mean, I finally just said I'm not cut out to hire managers, department managers, heads of departments. I'm not cut out to manage them. Because they come in and they get jacked up on my vision that I talk about, right? And then they repeat the stuff back to me. I think it sounds great. Well, they're just, come on, right? That's so obvious. But yet I probably went through 2 leadership teams because of that very issue. And therefore, I actually hired a recruiting firm to hire the president for me. For that very reason. So we were deep into the process, and I was looking at my B is slightly low. So, I'll learn to like you, but I first want to look at the data of it. But then when you repeat the good data back to me, I like you, right? Yes. As I just talked about. So I actually didn't get involved in the interview process until they had been vetted out for core values, vetted out for GWC fit. Do they want to have the capacity, looking at just their resume. And it really is, I think, what allowed me to make a phenomenal hire, and what's proven to be a phenomenal hire in that seat, because I didn't interact with them until way later in the process. In fact, and then I had my senior leadership team, some of who at the time I knew would not be with me in 6 months, but I actually got their input because they still knew, our core values, and they were able to interview for those types of things. So, interesting how, thinking about that, I think that's some of the best things that happened. And even though it cost me probably a couple of $1 million, right? It's what set us up for where we are today. Yeah,
that's really key. And when you get to a certain point, I think using some recruiting firms or getting outside help or counsel on key hires is so important. So important. because there's a lot to lose, and I tend to get kind of easily caught up. Like, am I vibing with this person? Do I get it? Is there good resonance here? And you can make the wrong decision way too quickly.
Right. Absolutely.
How about for you personally? Where are you personally getting your maybe counsel or encouragement? Or often being CEO is lonely, and you can't share everything with your core team.
Sure.
You need outside input.
Huge thing that I struggle with. Huge thing that I struggle with. And when I bought my brother out, I sort of lost the ability for a few year period to even be able to share with him because our relationship changed, and we were both trying to find out. Today, great. We did a trip to South Africa in July together. I think he would tell you the same thing. I think we're closer and better friends and have more mutual respect for each other than we've ever had.
Yep.
We still love tussling. We still love, and we never grew up tussling physically so much, but we love a good argument. We love, sometimes I'll just drop a bomb right in the middle of a conversation because I just love seeing him get riled up. And I know he enjoys doing the same with me. So, so I looked early on, I was 25 or 6 probably, so 7 years ago. I really started looking for an organization that I can join, a CEO forum of some sort. I didn't grow up, I didn't go to business school, so I didn't have the dorm buddies or the your entrepreneurship class or business class that a lot of folks have where they're building out. You go to Harvard or to any major business school, TCU in Fort Worth, and you end up with a sort of group of classmates that you really walk a lot of the rest of life with. I didn't have that. I didn't have high school, right?
Well, and that's what's, just to interject just real quick, I think that is one of the big benefits of college, to be honest with you. It's and school too, high school maybe more, but at a lesser degree. It's learning the things. Okay, that's part of it, but it's learning how to learn, and it's developing that network.
Unfortunately, I would say I have limited exposure, but we have, just since we entered Culture Index, we've been using them for about 2 years now. I have 7,000 applicants in the system. And I've interviewed, a few hundred folks myself, looked at thousands of resumes. And I think, unfortunately, while that is a very true point, it's like anything else in life. You've got to go in. Too many with a mission. Too many people come out and they have their drinking buddies, right? Or they have the buddies that are great for until you turn 25 and have kids and have responsibilities, and all of a sudden. But I also know for every 5 stories like that, I know 1 or 2 who are phenomenal. They do business together, they network together. They've truly come out of that, not just with a social aspect, but also a true network. So I looked at a number of different organizations, and personally, I ended up being invited to. It was funny. I was actually at a Dave Ramsey event. First one in Carlsbad, California.
Beautiful.
And it was, I remember I think one evening, this other gentleman and I started talking, and he ended up being from Texas, and now him and I are great friends, Josh Hopkins, and we're having cigars with Dave Ramsey and a couple of other folks, and having a great evening. And he introduced me. He said he's from Texas, he's from Midland, I'm from Fort Worth. We started talking. I started telling him what I'm interested about, because why was I at the EntreLeadership event? It was the first event I went to, so I was there by myself, without team members, and I was looking for that network and for that CEO group, leadership group that I become part of, to really share and bounce ideas off of each other. And so he told me about YPO. He was a YPO member, told me about YPO. We became friends. He gave me an invite, interviewed, and became a member of YPO. And so I personally have it just expanded on that idea. So back to, probably most of reading, I get more now out of my YPO network than I probably do out of books by far and large. So I'm actually part of 2 forums now. I just started an international forum around retail. So we've got a member from Scotland. We've got a member from Buenos Aires, or not Buenos Aires, from Brazil. We have a member, from New York, myself. We got LA. We have Florida. So there's 12 members of us from around the world, and it's CEOs Some are providers to retail, some are retailers, some are manufacturers to retail, some are marketing to retail, but it's all around retail. So we're all YPO members from around the world. But then we're all retail focused and here to make each other better. And YPO is a very unique organization. It's the oldest in its kind, and I think the highest quality. Just from an aspect, I wasn't looking for a church. I wasn't looking for a bunch of drinking buddies. I wasn't looking for the things I was looking for. They met. So I'm not saying it's the best for everyone, but it's the best for me. And the value I've gotten out of that, and my Forum 5 in the Fort Worth chapter of YPO, those guys, literally, you call any of them, they can tell you, and they won't because it's forum policy, YPO policy, nothing, no one, never. We absolutely do not share anything about each other. But the network, when I need my ass kicked, they do it, right? Now, with respect, within our core values as a organization and as a forum, but that group of guys is absolutely changed my life and walked through with me in some of the darkest things the last few years. I just lost my father, and so I at a time when my wife and I ended up, I had to close down my father's church where he was pastor. We were looking for something a bit different than that church, and so the process of finding and joining another church, Doxology Bible Church in Fort Worth, and looking at during the time I did at my first acquisitions, things that I went through, the failures and blessings, the failures and wins in life. They've been there. They're always a phone call away. I mean, I was talking to one, reached out to me for something at 11 o'clock the other night, right? We're there for each other. We're really tight. And I'll tell you, those guys know everything about me, except for the things I don't know about myself and they can't see. That's blind spots that we don't rub shoulders enough for them to be able to see. So that's been absolutely a big thing. And it's great because it's a very vulnerable, very real, very with integrity and just honesty. And so when they're struggling with something, it's shared experience. I'm not there to tell them what to do. They're not there to tell me what to do. We share shared experiences. And the things I've been able to learn is I share what my problems are, and we think through these things, and they ask clarifying questions, and they give shared experiences, or vice versa. Absolutely, absolutely. Not only just a wonderful thing, life-changing.
Yeah, interesting. So what do you think are the key components to that, or again, the principles that makes that work? If someone's listening like, man, that'd be great, but maybe they're not a president or a CEO, and so they can't join YPO, or maybe they can't afford it. What is it about that works? I'm thinking of, I think it's Mark Cuban that says, be careful about taking advice from someone who doesn't have a vested interest in the outcome.
Right.
And I agree with that, although sometimes it's actually good to take advice from someone who doesn't have a vested interest in the outcome. But what seems to me is this is people of similar responsibility. It seems like these are capable people. It seems like they're going to be wise. Now, they both do and don't have a vested interest in the device or the counsel they're giving you. They do because you're close friends and you're part of this forum, you're part of this group.
And there's really not that much counsel given, actually. Like I said, it's more shared experience because we're truly all interconnected, right? And we all have our unique journey. We're all, my name's Jonathan, your name's Kent. We're not the same person, but yet at the end of the day, you have kids and you're raising them. So when you talk about the I'm sure you're a wonderful son sitting with us here, and you're working with Dad on a Saturday, just like you and I did. Isn't it funny? I didn't know what a MacBook was, though. I didn't have headphones.
Exactly, right? That's because there probably wasn't one.
Right. But we've all walked this journey, whether it's marriage or business or whatever. So I think what you got to do is, and one of the number one reason I knew I wanted a forum of sorts. I didn't even know what to call it back then when I started looking, but I knew I wanted a forum, but I also knew that I wanted to be the small fish in the big pond. Okay. So one of our core values I told you as an organization is grow or die. And I fundamentally believe, I think it's the law of nature. You cannot grow if everyone around you, you have to at some point be plugged into people that are ahead of you in the journey, right? Yeah. So, if I go hang out with people who have a 2-month-old right now that's crying every night, daggum, I sound like a pro. We've had 4 kids, right?
Right.
But then I go talk to someone who has a 9-year-old, 1 year older, like yourself. You've already seen a whole year of life and changes that I haven't seen, right? Or then those people who have grandkids.
Exactly.
Right? Or kids that are just going to college or kids that are just being married. So the number one reason that made me join YPO versus C12 and some of the other organizations was because the average company size, I was looking for business and it's ended up being so much more than that, was so significantly larger than what I was, right? I was like on the bottom edge, hardly got approved kind of thing. And so what principle is that? For me, that's a principle of always reaching up if you want to grow. Right, as an individual. So it's great to have friends you just hang out with, right? But if that's all you have, if you don't have people who stretch and invest, so I mean, frankly, as we do that, we're all, probably ahead of each other in some way. I'm definitely behind them in a lot of ways. I mean, whether it's marriage or kids or business or faith or whatever that is. So I think the fundamental thing that makes it work is we have a commitment to each other. Yeah. Right? We have a code of conduct, code of ethics. And then I'll tell you, I really think the core thing is, and I think YPO realizes this internationally, there's 28,000 members, 20 million employees employed by YPO companies, $6 trillion of gross revenue. Right? Wow. So it's the third largest economy in the world.
Wow.
Really.
That's amazing.
But what makes it work? There's a YPO I text this morning. He's here in Nashville. Runs Souls for Souls. I don't know if you may or may not be familiar with the organization, but it's a phenomenal organization. Buddy's just a phenomenal guy. What makes it unique, I think, at the very, very core is trust.
Yeah.
So we have this core thing that we call nothing, no, and never. Think about in your life of one person who's nothing, no, and never. You can tell them anything. Now, if I tell you I killed somebody yesterday and you're my forum mate, they're calling the cops, right? Yeah. I mean, there's a boundary to it. This is not a cult or some kind of secret brotherhood. But I think that's what makes it work. That's the core of what makes it work. Because until I know, and so every meeting every forum meeting we start off our check-in with nothing, no, and never. We review our core values, and we ask ourselves, whoever's moderating, we ask ourselves, was there a possible breach? Did we get close to it? Right? And it could just be that I shared that I really, my struggle with heartburn, I figured out is coming from eating 20 minutes before I go to bed, and I've changed that. You know what? Why do you need to share that with anybody? Yep. Right? Or it could be something much, much more serious. Yes. Most of my stuff's much, much more serious. Yep. So whatever that is, though, it does not matter. It's nothing, no, and never. So think about it, church. Your pastor has a vested interest. Now, if he's a really, really, really good pastor, his vested interest is to point you to Christ. But a lot of pastors, that's not the vested interest. They want to they're looking for donations. Ultimately, they're looking for attendance. They're looking for support for their particular, flavor of Christianity. Yep. They're looking for so many other things. If you think about your friends, right? Your average friend, they're there until the relationship costs them something. Sure. Right? If you think about just about anything else in life, just about any other relationship, and I challenge you to think of one person that you know that is truly nothing, no one, never, unless it goes to the point of illegal
activity. And did you say you start every forum with that? Or
with that, yeah, absolutely.
You do?
Absolutely.
And what does that look like? Someone reads a statement, or someone just says, hey, remember, this is nothing, no one, ever?
Yeah, so we're always doing nothing, no one, never. I mean, that's just sort of like, man, we talk about that all the time. Oh, okay. Because it truly is the core fundamental principle that makes it work.
It's not like a formal statement.
But we absolutely do have a formal statement. We have core values. We have a mission of why are we here to help each other? Why are we joined here together today, et cetera? And so we read through that, and we, it's being present, right? It doesn't work. You and I both put our phones on Do Not Disturb, and it drives me nuts to sit in the meeting and everybody's on their phones. Why are you in this meeting? Go do something else, right? Yeah. And I don't care if you think I'm not important enough for you to have your phone turned off. Yep. I care that you came and said you're going to be present and you're not, right? Yes. And now I say that, it's something I struggle with myself. If I'm sitting in on a meeting, and right now with Zoom, it's really, really, really hard because you can't see the other person texting because, your eyes are looking at the video, not at the video camera. So you're already not going eyeball to eyeball. Exactly. It's impossible.
Yep.
I want to design a screen that where the video of the other participants are,
100%.
The camera is right on their eyes.
Right there, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So that you actually have that. So I don't think it's ever going to replace in-person meetings because of that.
Yep.
We use Zoom a lot.
Yep.
Obviously, in different markets, we have to use Zoom on a daily and weekly basis, but it's nothing like being in person. So anyways, that's I think what makes it work. And then we do the near misses, we call it, on the nothing, no one, never. So, some of us are friends personally, some of us aren't, some of us, work in the same community. There's opportunities to say, hey, did you know that, and I don't have a forum mate named Jim, but you know that Jim and his wife are expecting a baby?
Yeah.
Well, you start thinking about the repercussions. Jim and his wife were maybe going to have a reveal party, and you just destroyed that for him.
Right. Exactly.
Or maybe Jim and his wife always said, we're not going to have kids, right? And then all of a sudden they have you never know what's going on. And that's, not the greatest example, but you can think
I think it's actually a great example.
You can think of something that seems so innocent.
Yep.
And all this, and just, if you don't think it's a great example, which you said you do, but think about something you've heard through the grapevine about yourself, and you go, ouch, that hurts.
Exactly.
Or, I wanted to tell that person, why is my friend talking to him about it?
Yes.
So it's, I think, truly what does make it work. Nothing, no one, never.
Yes. I love that. And by the way, instead of putting money into a video camera in the middle of the screen, just go full on holograph right away. Where you see the person standing there. One of the funniest videos I just think that I've seen on any TV show, and I think you can probably see it on YouTube, but it's in Silicon Valley, where someone invents a holograph and it does not work out well. It's pretty funny, but there is some language in the video, but the nothing, no one, never, I think is really key. The closest that I would have to something like that is being an elder at our church. We have what's called an executive session. And about every elder meeting, we'll go into executive session for something or another. And everyone raises their right hand. We're in executive session. And what gets talked about in executive session does not get talked about outside of executive session with your wife, with a friend, with anyone. Matter of fact, out of the 6 or 8 or however many elders are in this group, you don't even talk about it with another elder later. In other words, what gets talked about in executive session talked about there, stays there, and then we come out of executive
Vegas
session.
Vegas had this figured out before we did. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there's a often a bad side to that because of where it is, but really the principle holds true. So and as you're talking, I'm just thinking more about your question. What makes it work? I think it's iron sharpens iron, which is one of our principles. Iron sharpens iron. So you can't be in that executive session with wood or
clay.
Yep. If you're clay, be with the best clay you can. If you're wood, be with the best wood. But whatever it is, be that best. So iron sharpens iron, that principle. Nothing, no one, ever. So it's the confidentiality and just knowing that we're truly here for no reason except to help each one of us become the best versions of ourselves that we have decided we want to become.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because that's the best pastor, the best business leader, the best father, all of us are there for slightly different reasons, although we're all CEOs. And then I think the third thing is just, so you have the foundation of trust. You have iron sharpens iron, and then we're literally not there to do anything together. So even in your executive session as a pastor's, you're running the church, right? You're there with a common mission. And if tomorrow you move to Hawaii, you're not there anymore, are you? Right? If tomorrow you got diagnosed with cancer, they're going to be there for you, right? But you're not going to be part of that group anymore. Yep. And that's what makes this unique is it surpasses all of that.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
We're literally there. We're not, in fact, one of our rules are we cannot do business together.
I was just going to ask that.
We cannot do business together.
So you can't strike a business deal with someone that you get to know and what? Interesting.
Now, I've had forum mates buy a product from me and I'll buy a product from them.
Yep.
But it's got to be a one-time basic little thing that's not a big deal. If I was going to buy a business from them, can't do it. Because that's a big purchase and it's potentially going to lead to us not truly looking out for the best of each other in forum.
Yeah, it seems like they've structured that really well. How about, this is changing subjects a little bit, but I'm curious with, I don't think it's any secret you've used acquisitions as a growth strategy. And maybe or maybe not that's part of the strategy going forward. How would you think through, for someone listening, or how have you thought through the difference between growing by acquisition and growing more organically by expanding locations?
So growing organically and through acquisitions, absolutely, still part of our strategy, and we're more committed to really both of those. The way I look at it is, our real goal is to grow organically. However, instead of coming to, I'll just give you an example, Harrisonburg, Virginia, and putting a factory in there when there's already 3 shed companies, there's already 3 great families that have, Steve, my market president there and partner, he's got a story like you do. His father founded that business 46 years ago, right? Wow. So he's got that same story that you and I do. And instead of going in, and I truly believe competition makes you better.
Yep.
I'm not going to go buy every company in Harrisonburg, Virginia, or in Virginia market, but I'm going to find the one that I believe fits us, right? They believe in, versus commodity, they believe in lifestyle structure. The core values line up. The owner's core values line up. Their mission as an organization is somewhat aligned. Sometimes it's, almost identical. Sometimes it's quite a bit different.
Yeah.
But the same trajectory.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Yep.
Different places in the journey, but the same trajectory. So instead of going in and opening a factory and installing a branch there and competing with and making his life hard, let's partner. So the thing, and I sort of, that was, again, I'm a practical person. That was just practically, I said, why go fight with these guys? Why not instead partner with them in such a way that makes everybody better? And then it became personal for me. And then it became something that I'm passionate about, is restoring. And so Trump says, make America great again. I'm on make the shed industry great again.
Yeah.
Right. So instead of going in and competing with someone, actually, there's a lot of companies that are struggling because they've grown past their leadership capability. They've grown past their cash flow. They've grown past their systems and processes or technology. And instead of going in and making their life even harder, if they have a similar enough vision, let's partner together so that your vision can be achieved.
Yeah.
We join hands to go achieve the vision. And we have one vision, one brand across the country, right? So there's product changes that happen, and there's culture changes, there's core values. We have one set of core values everywhere, one vision and mission everywhere, one BHAG everywhere. But we plug that in basically. And so, my BHAG is to serve 1 million families by 2028. So as we plug that organization in, they become part of that, right? And they have a number. So it gives a framework, and what allows what becomes the market president. So one of my requirements has been, as I talked about the sort of fit side of things, culture's core value, et cetera. But the other aspect of it is the person I'm buying out, because at the end of the day, these are not firms that are owned by private equity firms, right? They're individual families mostly, maybe a couple of families. So the current ownership or the current president has to continue to be able to serve as president. I'm not looking for someone that is looking for 100% exit. So I leave them a piece of the pie, right? They serve as market president, and we have a frank conversation. We talked about organizations changing. You may not be the right market president for this organization when we go 10X. May not be, but you're an owner, so you're going to want the best person that we can have as president.
Right.
Because it's in your best interest to both achieve your vision and, frankly, from a profit standpoint, from your equity standpoint, from your earnings standpoint, you want the best position. And so the good thing is I've been able, because I'm human as well, I've been able to lead by example in that. And so they saw me hire a different president for my own company because I'm not the right guy. Right. So I truly do believe in this stuff, right? It's not just theory that's great for other people. I believe in it because I've seen it be true for me.
Yes.
So that's why acquisitions, instead of just going out organically and doing the growth, as you know, in the industry, you can ship a shed 3 to 4 hours and you're okay. I think really to offer 5-star raving fan service, you can't be shipping stuff 10, 20, 30 hours right across the country. Yep. It just doesn't make sense, not only from a cost standpoint, but also, I had a client where we unfortunately rutted up his yard, right? If the branch is 12 hours away, it becomes either cost prohibitive to go make it right with him, or you sort of end up like most companies do, unfortunately, just sort of snubbing them off. No, we're going to go make it right. Even if you signed off on it, we're going to go back. We're going to make sure you're a raving fan at the end of the day, because that's more important to us than making a profit on that one shed. So that's why the strategy, it's become part of my passion now. A lot of these companies are sort of in a bankrupt state. Their owners are burned out, right? They're good people, but they've sort of, almost got cooked in the squat, as Zig Ziglar talked about. And so restoring their passion and drive and energy, and it's, I can tell you, my California market president, the guy was burned out, Willard Martin, great guy, the guy is gung-ho, man. I mean, he
that's
fires
wonderful.
me up even,
Wow.
So
what is that? He just has support now he didn't have before. He has resources, or he has
one is
camaraderie.
So one is superpower. I think he's got a group. So we have a market presidents meeting every Tuesday afternoon via Zoom. So we can talk about issues and challenges. There's a support group. He's got sort of his own YPO, but it's network or forum, but it's there for particularly what we're doing business in. So by the way, forums that are there to do business together can be good as well.
Right.
Just don't think they transcend everything.
Exactly.
Because the moment your efforts aren't aligned or your interests aren't aligned, it doesn't work anymore. So the unique thing about YPO Forum is it surpasses and transcends life circumstances. And again, it does that because we can't do business with each other. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. So we have that. We also then have what we call same page meeting. It's a Mark Winters, Gina Wickman principle, where we meet once a week, once every 2 weeks, depending on how much change and transition and growth we're going through in that particular market. Where myself as visionary, that market president is integrator, we just stay on the same page. And it's not, I don't show up with an agenda, they don't show up with agenda. It's what ideas, what disconnects, what concerns, where do you think we're not on the same page? We create the issues list, right? And we just put everything out there, and we lean into it. They lean into me and I lean into them. We sort of go, man, the other day when we were in that meeting, you made a comment that really just sort of, it sort of got under my skin. We put it on the issues list.
I see. And these are one-on-one meetings?
These are one-on-one meetings. So we do that every couple of weeks. And then we do annual planning. So I'll lead them and their leadership team through an annual planning session once a year, and then a quarterly planning session once a year, 4 times a year, where we go through really setting out the goals for the year, both financially, the profit, sales, those numbers, as well as just how many people we think it's going to take. Now, how do we plan around that? And then the core objectives, or as EOS, and we call it the rocks, right? The big things that need to happen this quarter. So we're doing a quarterly rock session, planning session. So I think that makes it work because we have a system and a process, and they have someone to bounce ideas off of, both each other as market presidents and then myself as CEO, and ultimately have one vision, one mission. We're not recreating this and second guessing ourselves all the time.
Right.
You've ran a business, you know what it's like. It's like, are we doing the right thing? Right.
Exactly.
And every 2 minutes you want to, or 2 days or 2 months or 2 years, you're questioning it. And sort of you have that sanity, that sounding board to sort of go, okay, no, we're doing the right thing. We just need to keep our heads down and keep going. The other thing that makes it work then too, I believe, is the market president and myself in the beginning of the relationship, sitting down and figuring out what is he or she really good at. And then we peel everything else away. Most folks in this industry, they're either good at selling or good at manufacturing. Right? Most market presidents, most founders they weren't great at payroll. They weren't great at reconciling. They weren't great at raising capital. They weren't great good at maybe organizational efficiency, unless it was in the department they sort of loved. So for me, it was sales, right? That's what I grew up in, and that's what I liked. For Steve, it was initially for Willard, it was on the manufacturing side. That's what he loves. And for Steve, it was more on the marketing and organizational side. So basically, we peel away all the things that are sort of distractions to doing business,
Right.
right?
Yep.
HR, finance, accounting, raising capital, all those types of things. We do all that back at home office in Fort Worth, and they're left to focus on those things that they truly enjoy and are great at.
Yes.
And so what gets left at the market level is manufacturing, install, and retail stores.
Mm-hmm.
And so the team they have infused energy, infused capital, infused vision, right? Core values. I mean, all these systems and processes that they didn't have, all of a sudden they have.
Yep.
And we don't just go drop it in one day, right? We talk through it. We sort of co-create together a custom version of it if we need to. But then ultimately they're left to focus. And we also go through RPRS, every person in the company. So when we go into the acquisition, we look at every person. We create the accountability chart on the bus, and we say, now everyone's outside, right? Everybody, including CEO. You're outside the building. You don't work for the company. And then we develop the accountability chart, and we identify the roles, and we start adding in people using the RPRS process, right? Are they the right person? Do they meet the core values? Are they the right seat? And what you find out I did this one acquisition, and him and I just talked about it yesterday. Actually, we were laughing about it, but I won't mention it because it doesn't matter. I have some, you have some, we all have something like this. And I go to him and I say, that's where I start. I go to the president. What people issues do you think you have? Who should not be here, right? And he can't really come up with anybody. And so I went to the leadership team and can't really come up with anybody. So then I'll try to identify those core people that are not management, that are not leadership, and I'll have one-on-ones with them. And they go, well, Bob, man, I mean, he's been watching YouTube in the corner for literally the last year. And our people, Kent, as I'm sure you know, they know before we do.
Oh, 100%.
When there's a problem.
Yep.
And so I called the guy in, and I just had a frank conversation, and I said, you can't be here,
Yes.
So I gave him a small severance package. I mean, come on, he doesn't deserve a great one. He's been watching YouTube for the last year. It's part of the reason this company's in a bad situation. Now, points to leadership because of lack of tools and resources and all that. But come on, that's pretty blatant, right?
Yes.
And then life happened, and literally the next morning, I find out the guy was expecting a baby. His wife was expecting a baby. The next 2 days later. Right? So that's where you got to go back to being human. Business-wise, 0 cents to this guy being at the company. He's gone.
Yep.
So I just wrote him a check, right? You're going to cost me money. You're costing me money being here because every other employee is seeing, what is he doing here? He's watching YouTube. That cost me thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I wrote the guy a check, for him to be able to get through the next month or so.
Yep.
So you got to balance these things, but you always have to do what's for the greater good of the organization, because the greater good of the organization is what's for the greater good of the people, the clients, the team members, et cetera.
Yep, for sure. It's one of the big takeaways, one of the big learnings that I had from building sheds in the shop as a kid is the way we had it set up. We had 2 lines, and the guys on the lines were they were the top of the shop. If you were a trim guy, you weren't quite good enough to be on the line. If you were a door and plate marking guy, you weren't quite good enough to be on the line. And not everyone wanted to be on the line. I wanted to be on the line. I wanted to be that fast moving, strong body, competitive, quick. I wanted to do that. So that was kind of always my goal. And then when you get there, you realize, okay, there's a very distinct difference in output between maybe you and someone else, or you can see it between other guys and then the other guy on the other line. You can so see it where this guy can literally perform about twice as fast as the guy over here. You'll have one guy on this line, and then you'll have 2 guys on this line. They're both getting, this guy over here, maybe he's getting $1 or $2 an hour more, but not twice. You know what I mean? And so you can see how it's got a front row seat at a pretty young age to see how different people have different capacities. And there's very different outputs, and they should be compensated accordingly.
Yeah. So we use all. I mean, I forget who made the comment. If I could, pay the receptionist for smiles on customers and other employees' faces, I'd pay her on commission too, right? So we are our
sounds like a Ramsey quote.
Almost our entire organization is performance-based compensation.
Really?
Our installers, our delivery drivers, factory workers, down to our bonus system and management. It's all performance-based, right? Because at the end of the day, if we're not good, we can serve families, but if we're not making a profit doing it, then we're not able to do any good in the world.
Yes.
Right? Because just building the product and that's great, but then be able to use those profits to buy missionary in Sudan a new vehicle, or save. One of the things that we do is invest into our local pregnancy centers. You can't put value on a life, but it turns out, I forget what the numbers now, like $7,000 investment or a $2,000 investment. You truly can scale saving lives.
Wow.
Yep. It's amazing. Yep. It's absolutely amazing. Now that baby's life is worth way more than 7,000 or 100,000 even, but capital going in for good really can have a great difference. And you got some phenomenal organizations here in your community that I had the pleasure of through YPO being introduced to and seeing them, and like to follow back up with them at some point. Bringing women off the street, sex workers, et cetera. Yes. It's amazing the work they're doing. So
that stuff takes resources.
It does. It does.
It takes money and resurces.
Absolutely. And you can't invest in your people that are already there if you don't have resources either. So
yes. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. 100%.
I was going to look up the name of the just to give a shout out to him if I can find it. But the name of the organization that does that work, I'll get it to you afterwards.
Well, is it End Slavery Tennessee?
No.
Okay.
It's not. It's not that.
Does it deal with sex trafficking?
It's not sex trafficking so much. It's bringing women off the street and literally supporting them for a year as they truly get out of the system. Because they go to jail, they get out. They got a shower now. They're fresh,
right? And
they get out and they go back to the same thing.
Yep.
So you got to really get them off the street long enough. And so they have a factory over there, and these recovered women are now working in this factory and providing products and additional funding to serve new people.
Yeah.
Thistle Farms.
Yeah. Oh,
phenomenal.
Wow. Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. Great organization.
Yep.
They've got a cafe, a coffee shop. They've got other things. I wasn't aware of the factory.
I could use a cup of coffee right now
Absolutely.
from Thistle Farms.
Yeah.
It was great.
No, that's a great organization. They have a location in West Nashville close to our church. Well, I don't want to keep you too long. It's a weekend. And
my wife's birthday today.
That's right. Happy birthday. What's her first name again?
Raquel.
So happy birthday, Raquel.
We've been married 10 years in July. So
this coming July?
Yeah, this coming July.
Oh, wow. She's about to have the big 1-0, huh?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I told her, I think we were probably married 6 months or 18 months, and we'd watched a movie, and it had this resort in Bora Bora, and I said, our 10th anniversary, we're going to go to Bora Bora. But I thought it's never going to come, right?
Right.
And here we are in July going to Bora Bora, obviously permitting depending on COVID, but have the trip booked, and so it's unbelievable that 10 years is here.
Let me know how that is. I've always wanted to go to Bora Bora. I've heard it's crazy.
It better be good because it's a long flight. I love long flights. I don't have any problem with them.
Yeah.
I love going to Africa. It's unbelievable. Other places in the world. But it's an island, so there's not a lot to do compared to somewhere like Africa, so we'll see.
Right. I'm sure it'll be great. Well, congratulations on your wife's birthday and on your 10th anniversary. Anything that you'd want to leave with listeners in closing? Have we covered it?
Oh, have we covered it?
Got a good start.
I think you'll find out, and you told me a little bit about your average demographic or population that's listening to your podcast. So from what I understand on that, I think find out your superpower as an individual. It doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're a janitor or a CEO or a pastor or a work at the coffee shop at church, or it doesn't matter. Leading a family, or you're a homemaker or whatever. Find out truly what your unique superpower that God gave you is, and then play into that, invest into that, and become that. And I think the second thing is core values. Figure out what those core values are for you personally, right? And not things like just integrity. Okay, integrity, that's sort of table stakes, right? Gotta have that to play. But what are those things that are uniquely you? If you lead an organization, a church, or a not-for-profit, or a for-profit organization, what are those core values that guide you and that allow you to, judge new team members and judge each other on an ongoing basis, right? I think it's a very, very, very key thing. And then just stay hungry. It's so many people get complacent, and get, or they have failures and they don't want to get back up and go make it happen again. And again, Dave Ramsey's a great example of what to do versus what not to do, right? Yeah. So it's just stay hungry, stay humble, right? And you know what? I'm not so worried about that one actually because life humbles us.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
where I get cocky about something, bam, right? Pride
Absolutely.
goes before a fall. And so that one is not really I think a principle you have to pay attention to. It'll take care of itself, just like gravity. It'll bring me down. And but you got to stay hungry and invest in others. You get what you give. You know, you don't give to get, but yet you do get what you give, and take care of yourself.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't pay attention to my health for a long, long time. I would work. I remember Saturday I was working. I sold, I don't remember, 8 or so units. And I looked up at my watch and I went, I'm hungry. And I looked and it's 8 p.m. I hadn't eaten breakfast. I didn't eat breakfast. I hadn't eaten lunch and I hadn't eaten dinner. And worked all day. You know, I've been drinking coffee. And I used to go through 5, 10, 12 cups of coffee a day. And
No
so
way.
I had to, my doctor told me I have to give up alcohol or coffee or steak. And so I gave up coffee. So I had a cup of coffee here this morning. I'll have an occasional cup of coffee.
Really?
But
Not every day.
I don't have every day, and I drink tea, but I don't have caffeine every day anymore. And I have a lot less of it than I used to.
Oh, wow.
And you know, it's solved my heartburn issues that I used to have. Acid reflux was killing me, wake me up at night, and then I had a sleep disorder that I finally have figured out and been doing things. You know, not the kind of sleep disorder that makes you. I don't have a problem falling asleep regardless of what's going on in life. I mean, it's a frustrating thing for my wife after 10 years, right? We can be talking and I'm gone. Or we can I just fall asleep. I lay down. I think the shortest she ever measured was like 45 seconds, right? And I literally took a cat nap for like 90 seconds and I was up and I was, just recharge that lasted me for a couple of hours. But I'm seeing how I really do have to get my sleep. The other 2 nights ago, I worked till 1:30 in the morning. Our financial audit's just about complete. So I was going through and reading that, reviewing financials, doing a couple other things, other projects. 1:30 when I went to sleep. I got up at 5 a.m. to go to the airport to fuel up my plane and head out. So last night I crashed in bed at, probably 8:30. And I woke up about 6:30 this morning. I had a good night's rest and I'm recharged and ready to go. So, and then take care of your spiritual health. Yeah. It's one thing we didn't talk much about on the podcast, but I've learned the hard way what not doing that, the consequences of it. So always been a Christian and went to church and pray over my meals and read the Bible. And, my father was a pastor and I served in church on the on the elder board and et cetera. But none of that gives you a relationship with Christ. Yeah. None of that truly, and I was fortunate, I think, in being shown the right way, but I just wasn't hungry for it. And so I'm going through that journey now of repairing some of the damage that's caused in my life, in my marriage, in my personal life. And I think just realizing, I went through a program recently called Regeneration. Never heard of it. It's phenomenal. Watermark Church in Dallas is the one who published it. I attended the Watermark campus in Fort Worth. And it was a 14-month program that I went through where we just get together. There's about 300 people in the group, that meet. We worship every Monday night. And I probably missed, 12 Monday nights, maybe, of the past 14, almost 16 months.
Wow.
So it took a time commitment. I had to rearrange my calendar, right? It was a sacrifice for me, sometimes for the company, and obviously often for my wife and family. So, but going through that, it's just it's a 12-step program, and you can be anything from you struggle with laziness, or you struggle with lack of discipline, or it can be very serious issues. I mean, drug abuse, or sexual abuse, sexual addiction, any kind of addiction, or any kind of anything really. You just want a closer walk with God. You really don't have anything terrible going on in life. Yep. It's just you're not close like you want to be, and it's really given me a realization personally of how messed up and screwed up I am. Yeah. Right. According to God's standard, and his my need for God's grace. It's not just some kind of overarching thing for humanity. Right. It's how depraved I personally am. Right. Yes. So you do a thing where you go through inventory, and gosh, it's a terrible part of the program. Right. And you think about all the sins you've committed, and the sins committed against you, and the harms you've caused to others, and the pride and the fear, right? Fear is a sin, right? The fear that you have, and you go and you document all of that. I mean, it's literally an entire book, and in 12 weeks, I think, going through just that part of the process.
Interesting.
And it's, it's really, in fact, I hope to this weekend go back to someone. It's not had a big impact on me. But I had a third grade teacher who did not believe in dinosaurs, and I had a dinosaur ruler. And ironically, I'm going to be in his neighborhood this weekend, and so I want to go talk to him and just tell him, you know what, I forgive you. So here's what happened: is he took the dinosaur ruler out of my desk at school, and then he lied to my parents about it and said he didn't. So he had a problem with the dinosaur ruler. Ooh. The problem was we had a fairly open school, and so I went and dug through his desk, because we often were through his desk looking for markers to use on the whiteboard, et cetera. Yeah. And found it in there, my brother's and mine. And he lied about it. And it's not about going back and in that case and getting retribution. Right. I just want to tell him, you know what? It's something I think about. When I think of him, I think of that, and I want to release him from it and tell him I forgive him. That's between him and God.
Yeah, that's worthwhile, man.
So that's been a phenomenal journey for me, and I'd highly encourage, recommend.
Is it available only in Dallas, or is it available in other cities as well?
There are other churches who do the program as well.
So it's not something you do online.
It's not something you do online, but
you have to find a partner church.
Great idea.
Yeah,
it's a great idea, and I think you could do it online. Maybe that's something you need to look into. I don't know. Yeah. But I'll tell you, I wish that every man and woman could go through this program.
Yeah,
I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. You do really end up having to be a believer because it's fundamental principles, but you don't have to be a believer to get started. You can opt out of the program at some point if you say, you know what, this Jesus thing's just not for me.
Yep.
Tremendous people. And you know what's unique about it again? Vulnerability and that trust. Yep. People getting up on the stage like you or I and just confessing to things that you go, gosh, we never talk about that in church, right?
Right.
I mean, God forbid.
Yep.
And yet it's being done, and then you see the repentance and the journey and the story. And it's not beautiful always, right? The story from the ashes is beautiful, but it's cost a lot of people their wives or their husbands or their jobs or their whatever it may be. But yet there's the beauty of God's design and restoration in that. So.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks for being on the podcast, man. I appreciate your time, and wish you the best with Ulrich. And cheering you guys on. You guys have had as long as I've been aware of you guys, you've had a really great brand, have done really well with that. So I think the branding and the culture and the values and those things, it seems like a strength of you guys. And even product design, you have great products.
We're literally in the process of redesigning, rebranding, not changing the name, but rebranding, updating your brand, updating your voice, because one of our core principles core values is grow or die.
Sure.
And I believe that we've probably not done enough of that in the last 18 months. And so we have we're totally revamping our products. I think you can't wear them out, right? And they have a shelf life, unfortunately there's not an expiration date printed on them.
Yep.
But they do have a shelf life. And so we're in the middle of that right now. We just had a meeting on that yesterday, sort of finalizing the direction. And we'll make final decisions on that over the next 14 days.
Yeah.
And then, launching into a new marketing strategy, working with an outside firm on that as well. So just, you always got to stay fresh, right?
Absolutely.
Back to a principle.
Yep. I hope things go good for you in the coming months and years, and at your other locations as well with your acquisitions. I hope those guys do really good, and guys and gals, and keep doing what you're doing. And thanks for being on the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.